I would focus like on a Tuesday and a Thursday. I would have a bike run brick where both of those have kind of race pace intensity.
That Triathlon Show 134. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Coach AJ Johnson of D3 Multisport, and our topic is: if you have a certain number of hours available in the week to train, how do you best use those hours? So as you can imagine, this episode is packed with specific example for specific scenarios, so I really believe this will be a big hit, unless the background noise here from this being my final intro and outro that I record at the airport waiting for my plane to Lisbon to take off makes it unlistenable. But I think we'll be fine. I think that the microphone that I have with me does an okay job of cancelling out any background noise. Before we get into the interview with AJ, this episode is sponsored by Precision Hydration. They are the sweat experts, and if you have any sort of questions at all about cramps, hydration, planning your race, hydration, etc., you can find all of the information that you could ever wish for on their blog on precisionhydration.com, and click through to the tab that says Hydration Advice. That's the name of their blog. They have plenty of articles there that are really good. They are the kind of articles that I wish all triathlon media would be: long, in-depth, and no fluff, but also very, very digestible, I would say. They make it very clear, and you can get the key takeaways pretty easily from those blog posts. So that's a great resource for all of your hydration investigations and research that you need to be doing. And mind you, if you're doing half or full distance triathlon especially, you cannot ignore this part of the puzzle. It is as important as training, nutrition equally so, but triathlon is not just swim, bike and run. Just like David Nichols said a few episodes ago, you need to become a student of the sport and increase your knowledge base in all areas of it. So Precision Hydration can help you with that on the hydration aspect, and it's the best place to learn about the hydration part of the puzzle. So if you go to precisionhydration.com and you want to try out their products, you can get your first box for free by using the promo code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps, at checkout. Alright, just a quick intro to AJ Johnson. He is a coach, and he used to be a triathlete himself, not racing actively any longer, but has raced a lot of Ironman events, including Kona 3 times. He has coached Pete Jacobs, who is a past Ironman Hawaii winner, and he is coaching athletes from the very beginner level to Kona qualifiers to world champions. I interviewed Mike Ricci, who's the founder of D3 Multisport, for whom AJ is coaching, in a past episode 98, that I'll link to in the episode description. And Mike really recommended AJ highly as a good interview subject, and I've been reading a lot of AJ's articles on Training Peaks, which I'll also link to. So I knew that AJ would be a brilliant interview, and this really turned out to be the case, because we have some very specific examples for how to structure your training week for a varying amount of scenarios of weekly training hours available. So let's get right into the interview with AJ Johnson. Hi AJ, welcome to That Triathlon Show. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much.
It's great to have you on here, and we have an interesting question, or interesting topic, I should say, that we kind of figured that would be useful for the audience to discuss, and that is how to optimize training for a set amount of hours. So we'll just run a few scenarios by you, because you've done a lot of this kind of time optimization problems in your coaching career. Let's start with the time crunched athlete that has 5 to 6 hours to train. So what is your general advice if somebody has just that amount of training?
So I always start with kind of understanding the athlete's history. So, if someone's coming from a swimming background or a running background, that'll definitely change things. But, given someone who maybe, swam a little bit when they were younger and has been on a bike for a little bit and, has run a little bit here and there, but someone who doesn't have a particular strength or weakness, I like to take those 5 to 6 hours and be even throughout all three sports. And the main reason I like to do that is because I think at this point in time, a beginner who's very time crunch, my goal is to just get them used to all three sports so they have a better understanding of kind of what they're getting into with the sport of triathlon. And it kind of really early on lets them know, what it's going to take to get comfortable in those sports, what it's going to take to be comfortable swimming to 3,000 meters up to 4,000 meters in a session. I think also, even on the bike, not only just the physical nature of it, but getting someone used to, the new technology that's available on new bikes. If you haven't been on a bike in a decade and all of a sudden, you've got electronic shifting in 22 gears and you don't know the difference between, carbon clinchers and disc brakes and all that sort of stuff, it can be a bit intimidating. And then on the run, of course, just the physical nature of it. So just getting an athlete used to the process of each sport so that they, again, can really kind of understand what it's going to take for them to progress. And maybe they decide, hey, I'm happy with just being very recreational. I'm happy with doing this almost on a weekend warrior, sort of scenario. Or, as is more often the case, someone they get really into it. They get the challenges, and then they start moving up the ladder in terms of how much time they're willing to devote. So starting off, I just keep it pretty balanced across all three.
And would that mean that pretty much every workout is the same length, or do you have like shorter workouts in the week and longer in the weekend, or how does that break down?
Yeah, I mean, typically that is what works for most athletes, right? Is, the longer workouts during the week. But, again, given 5 to 6 hours per week, I wouldn't see where, I personally would not want to do, 3 hours of the total, hours for the week over the weekend. I would want to space it out if possible. So an hour, 6 days a week versus 2 hours on a Saturday, 2 hours on a Sunday, and then, an hour on a Tuesday, an hour on a Thursday. Because I think consistency is the key. And in my mind, that's always been it. You can be more consistent the more you break down the workouts and space them across, because you're just, spreading the load out, per se, on the body and giving it, time to recover a little bit. So, but yeah, by nature, right, the weekend workouts are going to be a little bit longer than anything on the weekday.
And what if somebody has a background in one of the sports? Let's say that they have done quite a bit of running and maybe even some cycling, but swimming is their big weakness, as it is for many. Would things change in that scenario, and how would they change?
Yeah, definitely. I would obviously focus more time on the swim in this case, right? Whatever the sport is that they have the least, the least experience in. It gets a little difficult because, an hour swim, I mean, that's especially for a beginner, right? That's a long time to be in the pool, but an hour on the bike, even for a beginner, isn't really all that long. So there's also that I take into consideration. But yeah, I would definitely say, okay, if you're comfortable running, if you've been running for the past, solidly for the past 4 or 5 years, 5Ks, 10Ks, things like that, then, hey, maybe we can get away with, 20-minute sessions, right? You're not really building fitness with those for that athlete. They have running fitness. You're just keeping the body kind of in tune with the pounding it takes from, running. But then you're using the other, 4 hours, 4.5 hours with focus on the pool and, focus on just getting them used to the bike.
And what if somebody is more advanced, intermediate to advanced, but maybe for some reasons, change of jobs, new family members, whatever, they find themselves limited to 5 to 6 hours, and maybe they decide to use those hours to focus on the shorter distances, typically, I guess. How would you then use those hours?
Yeah, at that point, I think that athlete maybe, who's got a year or two under their belt, they have a better understanding of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I think they also have a better understanding of what they want to get out of the sport. And so in that case, I would say, all right, we've got, so let's say we've got 6 hours this week. What can you reasonably focus on? Because again, 6 hours a week cycling is, not a whole lot necessarily, versus 6 hours of swimming is a lot of swimming for a lot of athletes. So with that amount of time, it's really hard for someone to say, hey, I want to bring up my bike, just because again, the time that it takes to do that, even for short course, even if you're, just racing, sprint and Olympics, I still think that, you need a little bit more time on the bike. So I would push that athlete a little bit more towards, hey, let's focus on the swimming and the running, and get them to a point where, okay, they can really, really run a fast 5K, a really fast 10K. They're coming out, further up in the water than they have before. And just concentrate them in those two areas.
So how would, let's say, you can pick any example you want, but let's say you want to bring up either the swim or the run. How would a typical week be structured for this athlete? Because he would like to maintain the other two disciplines, I guess, and not lose the fitness in them.
Right. So if you're talking about like all three sports, like how to structure it for all three, or just for the run?
Yeah, you can take it any example. Like if you want to have a period where you focus on the run or the swim, maybe for this athlete, like let's say they are an advanced athlete, but now they're limited to 6 hours per week of training, and they train for sprint distances.
I think in this instance, one thing I would really take advantage of is brick training. Just a lot of bike run, because number one, it's obviously very race focused, and number two, one of the main reasons I like to do this, because with 6 hours a week, almost all of it has to be, it has to be quality, all of it. And I think that's true, even if you're, training 25 hours a week, but it's really, really, really important that those 6 hours per week really, really, really be focused on, their, obviously just making them faster, particularly in this case with an advanced athlete. So, given that, say Monday through Friday, an athlete, can get up early, or, after the kids go to bed or whatever, put in like an hour and a half, I would focus like on a Tuesday and a Thursday. I would have a bike run brick where both of those have a kind of race pace intensity. So whether that's, that'd be intervals on the bike, and, right off the bike, just even a 15, 20-minute run. Doesn't have to be long, but that would be, get the legs turning over, get to race pace, hold it for, 10, 15 minutes, cool down for 5, stretch, and you're done. So you've got, 2 of those sessions per week. That's, anywhere between 2 to 2.5 hours maybe. And I think so now you've got, 2 really good race specific sessions. And then I would almost do the same thing on a Saturday or Sunday if they can, but just give it a little bit more length. Hopefully we can get maybe 2 hours in. So now you've got 3 sessions where you've hit the swim or the bike and the run. You've given them intensity. It's race specific. Maybe they can even practice transitions. They can also be working on their nutrition, because I think even for sprint and Olympic distance athletes, you still have to know, is it good for me to take a gel right off the bike? Do I want to take it 10 minutes before I get off the bike? That sort of stuff. And then of course, then I would work the swims in kind of on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or, Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, something like that. And there you've got another, 3 hours there. So that's kind of in general what I think it might look like. And I'm just really a big fan in general of just race specific training. I think brick training is even throughout the week is a big help. Not only just for fitness, but just time.
Yeah.
Right. Just super efficient.
I think we actually ran over the amount of time there a bit with the 6 hour limit. So if you really try to narrow it down to 6 hours, so let's say that you have to shorten either the swim or the maybe one of the brick sessions, like the weekend brick. So what would you really, if you had to boil it down to 6 hours exactly for this athlete, what would it look like?
So right. So what I would do is rather maybe take away from one single session, I would try to cut like 15, 20, 30 minutes out from each 3 sessions. So maybe the Tuesday session is an hour only, like a 40-minute ride and a 20-minute brick. And, same thing on Thursday. And then, Saturday, would be, so rather than, taking one of those and cutting a full, because they're short enough already. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So let's move on to, I guess this is, at least from what I see, the typical amount of time that triathletes have to train in the 7 to 10 hour per week range.
Yep.
That's at least most of my athletes. So if we first talk about those that are focusing on the short course racing, how would you structure that for them?
So I kind of use, I have a week structure that I think works really well for a lot of time crunched athletes. And it starts off, Monday is a swim, right? It's usually drill focused, recovery focused, maybe if it's an athlete that has a little more background with swimming, feels a little bit stronger in the swim, it might just be a longer, not necessarily recovery focus, but not, anything with race pace, maybe some pulling, give the legs a little bit of a break. Then Tuesday, like I said, I go back to that bike, run, brick. And I'm looking here that, these athletes, again, they're getting up in the morning, trying to get this session in before work, something. So this is, again, where I do a bike, run, brick. And in this case, with more a bell curve sort of athlete, this session gets changed up between lactate threshold sort of work, sweet spot training, muscular endurance. So like big gear sort of work. If the athlete's going to be, racing on a hilly course, I'll add in a lot more big gear or hill training stuff, which, you can do on a trainer even. And then again, right off that bike would be just a quick run. Wednesday, I like to do just a freestanding run. And in this case, again, if it's short course, maybe it depends on if this athlete, has how long their history is. If they have a longer history and I know their body can handle it, I might on this Wednesday run try to get in some more race pace stuff if they, think their body can handle it. If not, then, this is, for short course athlete, 30 to 40 minutes, aerobic threshold sort of, or just, I should say aerobic, effort. And then if they can, I really like for them to do, a swim that Wednesday as well. So, maybe they're running in the morning and then swimming later in the day. And I hope I try to have them do the run first, because that's where the quality is. Then Thursday, again, back to that run, bike, run, brick. So if, on Tuesday, if they did some lactate threshold, then maybe Thursday it's more muscular endurance and another quick run off the bike. Friday is just a swim. And I like that to be a little bit of a longer swim, getting them used to kind of more, longer intervals. And then Saturday, Sunday is kind of the classic, longer bike, short run, and then, run on longer run. And I actually mix up I don't always have the athletes run, bike on Saturday, run on Sunday. I think athletes really need to do their long quality run, even if it's short course, on a Saturday because on Friday, it's a little bit of a recovery day for the legs per se. And then they could go and really nail their Saturday run and get a lot of confidence in their run.
What about those runs off the bike in those brick workouts? Mm-hmm. You alluded to it a little bit, especially with the very time crunch athletes, that there's a lot of quality there, like race pace. Mm-hmm. If you have a bit more time, like these athletes that we now talk about is it still the case that they always have some quality in the brick runs, or is it sometimes just easy running, just getting used to the biomechanics, or how do you like to structure that?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it's really just get off the bike, run how you feel, just get used to, early on in the season, particularly, right? Just get used to that feeling again. As we get closer to race day, definitely starting to add in more race specific stuff. So whether that's, again, a short course athlete, putting in some, some threshold sort of intervals. If it's a long course athlete, I still do, threshold sort of race pace sort of intervals, but I'll also focus a little bit more maybe on hills and building strength. Cause I'm a big believer that, long course racing is all about not physically breaking down. Right. And so I think, I'm a big believer in muscular endurance. So if they can do some hill training, that's where I think there's a little more quality for the long course athlete.
Yeah. Okay. So if we add up all those hours, so we had the Monday swim. How long would that be?
I always struggle with that Monday swim because, most athletes, they've got to get everything together, drive to the pool. And I don't want it to be a, 20-minute session. I don't want an athlete to have to drive 15 minutes to the pool, swim for 20 minutes, and then drive 15 minutes home. So that's going to be, 45 minutes to an hour, I would say.
And then the break 1:15 or something like that, or?
Yeah, exactly. An hour 15 or so. And again, like I might, the Tuesday and Thursday might both be an hour 15, or one might be an hour, one might be an hour and a half. If particularly more for the long course athlete, if I want them to try to get a longer run off the bike, I might push one of those days longer, but then the other one has to be shortened up because usually it's just a time crunch.
Yeah. And Wednesday would be how long a run? You said it might be 40 minutes for the less experienced athletes, but maybe how long would it be for a more experienced athlete in that case? And the same for Wednesday swim.
Yeah. So for the long course athlete, that run probably still isn't more than an hour, because again, Tuesday was not an easy day for them. Thursday is not going to be so it's kind of like this 3-day mini block. So it'd be about, even for the long course athlete, like 45 minutes to an hour. And then that swim, same sort of thing. You're looking at 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay. So we're up to now, and the Friday swim, is that an hour or even a bit longer? You said it's one that you like to be a bit longer sometimes.
Yeah, that's probably, still only 45 minutes.
Okay. So so longer intervals, I guess. So
yeah, exactly.
Just trying to add up. So sorry, just trying to add up all the intervals here to make sure that we stick in to make sure that athletes can identify which block they belong to, and then get the right kind of structure. So that would be like 45 minutes on the Monday, and then let's say 1 hour 15 on Tuesday, so 2 hours, and then we have an hour and a half on Wednesday, so 3.5, and then 4:45 after the first day break, and then 5:30 after the Friday swim, and then we have the how long would the we had what did I say?
about 5.5 hours, 5 to 5.5 hours.
Okay.
I mean, you could even push it. You can even push it to 6. So if you've got an athlete, that and I think that if you're able to do all of that Monday through Friday, particularly for a short course sort of athlete, that might be closer to the 7-hour range than the 10-hour range. And again, for that short course athlete, some of those weekday stuff would be a little bit shorter. So, that still gives someone, 3 to 4 hours on the weekend. And I mean, I think it's a bit of a struggle maybe to do, full. I think as you move towards the like middle of the season and someone's really, I think endurance is built over time, as obviously. So, I might, be able to say, okay, we're gonna push, we're gonna get in as much as we can as on the weekend, because I think it's 7 to 10 hours per week. There's still going to be, particularly for the long course athlete, that last month, you're still going to have to go, all right, hey, we might have to push this a little bit. We got to get some extra hours in over the weekend for this short amount of time, solely because I think, Ironman just demands it, right? Because, I mean, for Ironman, you can easily put in towards the end, a big block, you could easily put in a 7-hour weekend. right? I mean, a 4 or 5 hour bike on Saturday, right? And then an hour, I mean, now you're at 6. So
Yeah.
it's hard to, it's always interesting to see, like, because, these athletes may have 7 to 10 hours per week. I've worked with athletes that just because of work, they can't do anything on a Tuesday and a Thursday, right? So now all of a sudden things do get a little bit more concentrated, and, things get a little bit more creative, right? Where, you're like, okay, you've got to now kind of throw that week out the window, and all right, we're doing 3 sports on a Wednesday, 3 sports on a Friday, and doing what you can on a Saturday.
Yeah. You mentioned a few of the differences already between focusing on short course and long course, even on the same amount of hours. One being that last thing about in the last month or so before the big race, you might have to sacrifice a bit and get extra hours in. But other than that, before, like, let's say 3 months out or so, when you're still doing that set amount of hours, what are the things that are different in terms of the weekly structure, if there are any, between the short course and long course athletes?
There's usually, for me, not much in terms of the structure as far as the week goes, if the athlete's schedule allows it. It's more so what each individual workout is about, because the key obviously with short course is you have to have. I do think short course athletes focus a little too much on threshold intervals and just speed, because you do have to have a solid aerobic base first before you are able to go and really maximize your potential for short course and holding lactate threshold and that sort of stuff. So, I don't want it to sound like, hey, it's all just intervals. It's just they're really concentrated in at specific times. But still, it's more, there's just more speed workouts in the short course athlete program, whereas the long course, I'll focus more on muscular endurance. Like I said, over gear work on the bike, hills on the run, that sort of stuff. That's probably the biggest difference.
And one final question with this time range for the beginners of the sport that have the time to do this time training.
Sure.
It might be too much for them to start at this level. So how long would you recommend they stay at a slightly lower training level, like the 5 to 6 hours per week we discussed before moving up to training 7 to 10 hours per week if they really want to do it, but you may need to hold them back for a while to make sure that they can handle the training. So what's a recommended time range there?
Right. Well, I think you're spot on with that. I think you get a lot of athletes that are really excited to go out and train, and their motivation, everything is in a good space, but they start out at 100 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden, they're dealing with a knee injury or something like that. So, in that case, I definitely want that athlete to stick more to the lower end of 7-8 hours. And again, I think there it's I'm really careful to space that out. I wouldn't have them. Again, as long as the athlete's schedule allows, really trying to space all of those 7 hours or 8 hours out evenly throughout the week. A little bit more on the weekends versus, like I said, that sort of athlete, I would not have them doing, 3 sports on a Wednesday because they couldn't work out on a Tuesday or a Thursday. I would just, this is what we're able to do. It's 5 hours right now. It's 6 hours right now. I know you can do more. I know you want to do more, but let's build yourself up and take a little bit of time to give get your body used to what it's going to take to train like this versus, like I said, starting out at 9 hours, you get two good weeks in, and the next thing you know, they're at the doctor with a knee problem or a hip problem, and now you're starting down a bad path with injuries. And I also think psychologically for that athlete, right? Like, hey, they're really super motivated. They've got this great 2 weeks, and now the brakes are put on by an injury, and it's really mentally difficult for particularly a newer athlete to kind of handle that. So that's kind of my take, and a lot of that is more just like you were saying, like talking to them and helping them understand the long-term plan, and getting them to buy into that.
Yeah, great. And what about the content of their training? Would you have them do the same kind of training and the same kind of intensity in the race specific period that you described with the threshold intervals, etc., or would you still focus more on the aerobic side of things with these athletes? So we're back from some connection issues. You were saying that you still want to give them something to focus on rather than just going out and riding and running. But then I couldn't hear you any longer. So if you can please take it again from there.
Sure. Yeah. So, I would never just tell an athlete, go ride for an hour and run for 20 minutes. There's not any structure to that, obviously. So even, for a beginner athlete where we're not going to do, really intense intervals or have some really complex sort of workout, it may just be, spin at 95 or 100 plus RPMs for 1 minute, 5 by 1 minute, or might get into, zone 3 for, 3 by 3 minutes. So give them something to, shoot for within the workout, but it's not going to be nearly as intense as, someone who's been in the sport for 3, 4, 5 years. And I'd also say that, the same thing kind of with, like I said, I'm, kind of a fan of the muscular endurance sort of stuff. With newer athletes, I definitely work that in. But same thing, I work it in very slowly, particularly for someone who, hasn't done a lot of cycling, or hasn't done a lot of running. I don't want them to get injured, obviously. So, overgear work on the bike is going to be done in shorter intervals, 3 by 3, 3 by 4, that sort of stuff. Hill repeats are going to be, or hilly runs are going to be, again, shorter interval sort of stuff. And then, in all of those workouts within Training Peaks, there's always big bold, pre-comment. If you feel any pain at all in your knee or hip, whatever, shut it down, stop the workout, spin easy or, walk home, whatever. Cause, the muscular endurance stuff does take a while to build as well. So definitely dial it back for the newer athletes. And, I think a lot of those athletes also, they don't know their zones yet. They don't know necessarily the difference between zone, upper 3, 4. They know this is kind of hard. This is really hard. I'm really out of breath. And so I like to give, if I'm just starting with an athlete, give them kind of 2 weeks of working with them, understanding, what's working for them schedule wise, mainly. And then I'll do, some sort of zone tests, on the bike and the run. So when they do see something on the schedule and it's, 3 by 3 in zone 4, they know, what to be doing. And I think that sort of structure, particularly for beginner athletes, is really motivating.
Yeah. Perfect. And let's now move on to the high training volume bucket. We can obviously I structured these as first like 11 to 15 hours per week, which is and then one like really high volume with 16 plus hours per week. But maybe you can treat them as one and then just
Sure.
talk a little bit about the differences for those that have even more hours, like 16 plus, 20 plus hours per week, compared to those that are slightly more limited.
Sure. In this case, again, first thing I want to know is, how can we allot these hours? I keep saying I like to spread them out over the week, but, I've worked with athletes, I worked with an athlete that traveled by plane 2 to 3 times a week. Right. And I've also worked with athletes who, are, work from home. And those are, those 15 hours, particularly for a long course, you've got to get to that point where, maybe not, for months and months, but at some point you're putting in longer hours. And it's very, like I said, you get creative with some of that stuff. And I worry about with those athletes that we've got to put in, 3 and 4 hour days, twice a week, or, 3, 4, 5 times a week, or, I guess in that case, it's really more 3 times a week. I worry about injury with those athletes, but, again, given the scenario where, someone who's working a 40-hour week and, Monday through Friday, that sort of stuff, that athlete, and even short course too, right? That athlete has to be committed to, those 15 hours are coming in the sense of they're getting up maybe an hour earlier, right, to get in that extra hour, or they're staying up an hour earlier or hour later to get in that extra hour. And they're doing that, 2, 3, 4 days a week. And that's where those extra hours are coming from. So again, I still like that structure Monday through Friday with the swim, brick, swim on Monday, brick on Tuesday, run and swim on Wednesday, brick again on Thursday, long swim Friday, and then the weekend. It's just how those are structured. So same thing. So, that Monday swim gets a little bit longer. That Thursday bike and run gets a little bit longer. You might even do, those, because they're longer, you have a little bit more structure to them in the sense of different types of intervals, mixing up intervals between, we're going to do progressive intervals, zone 2, 3, 4, 5, and coming back down, that sort of stuff. That Wednesday swim gets a little bit longer. The Wednesday run gets a little bit longer. And that run then Wednesday, because it's longer, I think it opens up for a little bit more specificity in terms of, hey, if it's going to be a hilly run, then go find some hilly terrain. Because I always feel that athlete that's committed to 11, 12, 15, 18 hours, typically those athletes are also more adamant about achieving their goals, right? They put a little bit more on the line in terms of what they're committing themselves to. So they have higher expectations in terms of, their time on the course, and then obviously their placing. So these are a little bit more, I don't want to say results focused, but they want, and understandably, they want to get results for the time they're putting in, because these are athletes that are getting up at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, So then again, Thursday that brick is a little bit longer. Friday, that long swim now, if it's a long course athlete, that long swim now has can be up to 4K. Longer intervals, 300s, 400s, 500s. But I also do like to do some like Ironman or half Ironman simulation swims. So after a warm up, you're doing some really fast stuff, then kind of some settling in, some cruising, and then another little short spurt to kind of simulate, having to pass somebody, and then getting back to a steady pace. And then you hit the weekend, right? And this is where it all comes down to, what's the race? What's the terrain like? And I think here, really, the weekend is also a big place where, even for veteran athletes, nailing down nutrition, right? Nailing down your pacing, nailing down your equipment choices are really, really key things that I think a lot of athletes may not necessarily focus on. They might, go out for that 3-hour ride, that 4-hour ride. And, instead of practicing race day nutrition, they might be stopping at the gas station, and sitting for 10 minutes. And, at that point, the heart rate comes down, obviously, and, you can digest just about anything. I should say, not a lot changes in terms of structure. It's just how many hours are you able to put in with those throughout that week.
And would the relative amount of intensity change when you have more hours compared to the ones that have less hours, like 7 to 10 hours per week?
Right. That's a good question. And I think, given that, this athlete has a longer history in endurance sports and they can physically handle it, I would give them more intensity, obviously, particularly for that short course athlete. If this were a newer athlete, right, someone who, for the past, maybe last season they were training, kind of in that bell curve area, right, 8 to 10 hours a week, and now they want to jump up and, say, hey, I really want to, be top 10 in my age group at, nationals or whatever, and I'm willing to commit, 13, 14 hours a week. That athlete who has physically, gone through a season or two of training, I would tentatively give them more and see what they can handle. Because, I would obviously never start out with, even a beginner athlete that, has 12, 13, 14 hours to train. And I've worked with athletes like that. Just because you have more time doesn't necessarily mean you're able to handle that workload. right? Because the intensity is really, I think the toll it takes on the body for a lot of triathletes kind of underestimate that. And a lot of them maybe assume that, hey, a 6-hour ride is going to really takes it out of me more than, a 2.5-hour ride. But if that 2.5-hour ride has intervals and, you're really working really hard, you're just doing a lot of race pace, that's a different type of fatigue. But it's just as, strenuous on the body.
Yeah. So if we go into not necessarily the race specific period, but again, let's say 3 months out of a Q race, would how many of those workouts roughly would be just easy or not have, and let's say not have any zone 4 or zone 5 intensity, and how many, or even zone 3, be just zone 1, zone 2, and how many would have intensity to them roughly?
Yeah. So, again, I that the Tuesday, Thursday brick will always have some intensity to it, or muscular endurance to it, because it's that session. For me, I feel like 2 quality sessions that you can hit the bike and the run at the same time, right? So those definitely would still have some sort of specificity to them. It's really kind of that Wednesday run. And then also the long run on the weekend and the long bike on the weekend. What kind of intensity is in there earlier, in the season, middle of the season, that sort of stuff that maybe doesn't have as much intensity to it. We're still building. There's definitely still intervals. I'm a big fan of like sweet spot training. I think working those in. Those sorts of intervals in, again, working in the muscular endurance intervals. But, then as we get, so I'll give you a good example. So the long ride, so for 3 months out, the long ride for an Ironman athlete, right? I don't think they need to be riding, 6 hours for, months at a time. So, let's just say it's a 4-hour ride that might have some, 3x20, at zone 3, kind of sweet spot area sort of stuff to it. Then closer to race day, that changes more to a race simulation, in terms of, okay, if this hour, you're going to warm up, and then, you're going to go and do, kind of what, race pace, race simulation effort, whether that's, hopefully it's an athlete with a power meter, and say, okay, this is the power we're aiming for. I want you to, hold this for, 3 hours or whatever, practicing your race day nutrition, no stops, all that sort of stuff. And then right off the bike, you're going to get use your race shoes, and you're going to go run 20, 30 minutes, but it's going to be kind of at your goal race pace as well. So, just getting the athlete more and more and more in tune with what they want to accomplish on race day and how they're going to do that.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. So finally, are there any things that you use just generally, like maybe some unconventional methods to do time efficient training, or think outside the box with how to structure your training that we can share with the listeners?
I think there are a few things. I think one is, and I don't know how outside the box this is, but I like I said, I don't always have the long ride on Saturday and the long run on Sunday. I think so many athletes say, well, I'm not a great runner. And a lot of it may just be mentally that because they've never given themselves a chance to have a really great quality long run. I think it's more particular Ironman athletes. They're much more like, well, I'm always going to be running on tired legs. And yeah, that's true. But if you never give yourself a chance to really nail that, hour and a half, 2-hour run, you don't get that sort of mental confidence from having a run like that. And the other thing is, what that does then for you on Sunday is now you're biking on tired legs. And I think a lot of, again, even half Ironman athletes, but Ironman athletes, you're going to be biking on tired legs too. Nobody's fresh at the 3 and 4 and 5 hour mark. So I think that, that maybe not be so much outside the box, but a little bit. And then the other thing is on the weekends, as we get closer to race day, this one's a little bit more logistically difficult to pull off, but I try to have athletes do a swim bike break. I think that's really underutilized, and any of my athletes that I know that I can do that with, I try to get 3 to 4 of those sessions in, because when it's very different if you wake up on a Saturday morning, you have your pancakes and your coffee, you read the paper, you let that digest, you get on the ride, and then you do your, even if it's an Ironman race simulation, a half Ironman race simulation, that's very different than having swam for even 20, 30 minutes, getting on the bike and going. So to really nail down race day nutrition, that session is super key, because if you're an Ironman, you're going to be getting on the bike and you won't have taken in any calories for an hour 15, hour 20, and all the blood in your body is more up to your upper extremities. You've been swimming, now all that blood's got to get shunted down into your legs. What's happening with your digestion? Can you take a bar, or can you take a gel or whatever? 10 minutes into the bike, 15 minutes into 20 minutes into the bike, what works for you? So I think that session really for race day simulation is pretty eye-opening for athletes that haven't even for an Ironman or a half Ironman sort of athlete that maybe has done 2 or 3 years worth of Olympic distance, so they're not they know what it's it's like to get out of the water and try to bike, but it's totally different when you've got to when nutrition is such a key for the long course racing. That session, I think, is one that I think a lot of athletes should definitely incorporate into their training. I think those are probably the two most outside of the box things. For me, I'm just a big believer in consistency over time, right? I mean, I know what it's like to want the results tomorrow, right?
Or yesterday.
But, yeah, exactly. But the nature of endurance sports, right, is aerobic, right? Even short course athletes, right? That's still the top ITU guys, they may only be racing for an hour 50, right? But that's still an endurance sport compared to 5K and 10K runners, right? And so it's the ability to put in time every week after week, month after month. And I think if you really want to reach your true peak particularly for long course racing, you need to be willing to put in 2 to 3 years worth of consistent work before you can kind of really see what you're going to be capable of. And I was talking to my athletes, the athletes that I work with, I think there's 2 types of potential, right? There's your true genetic potential, where if you were 20 years old and you weren't working and all you did was race and train, right? You could reach your true genetic potential. 99% of the athletes that I work with, I call, we're trying to reach our real world potential, which is how much of potential can we reach given the fact that you're working 35 to 40 hours a week. Maybe you have kids and you have other social engagement, you have things pulling your life in different directions. So sure, it may not be your true genetic potential, but given the fact that you have all this other very important stuff going on in your life, what kind of goals can we reach for you? So and it's just, like I said, the nature, it's hard. And I know this from personal experience. It's hard to think that long term, but once you get to that point, once you've got 2-3 years in the bank, then you can really start to, kind of mess with your schedule, try out new things, try out new training methods. So I would implore all athletes and just think long term.
Well, those are great points, and I want to note a couple of things here, a couple of related episodes actually. First, what you mentioned about the nutrition being so important, that's something that we had just a couple of episodes ago in a case study with David Nichols, who qualified for Kona, and he mentioned that changing his nutrition and his approach to nutrition really was the big game changer for him, and really focusing in on that in training, which allowed him to do it properly in racing, taking on 100 grams of carbs per hour on the bike. So totally agree with that. And then the other thing you mentioned there, volume and how it's an aerobic sport. Damn it, as Andy Coggan said, it's so true. And another related episode is the one called Seiler's Hierarchy of Endurance Training Needs, where we covered the pyramid of the biggest priorities, and volume was the big base, the most important. So totally agree with those things, and great that they come up again, because it is very, very important.
Yep, so, absolutely.
Let's roll into the last part of this interview, the rapid fire questions. Take 15 seconds or less to answer these, starting with, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to triathlon?
I would say it's a book called Once a Runner. It's a great motivational book. It's not really I shouldn't say it's not really about how to train or anything like that, but it's just a classic book that will just make you want to go and train and race. And I read it and get motivated every time.
What's your favorite piece of gear or equipment?
I got to say aero wheels. You put aero wheels on any bike and it makes you want to ride faster. And the bikes just look cooler with aero wheels.
And what do you wish you had known or wish you had done differently at some point in your triathlon journey?
I wish that I had done a little bit more race-paced work. I was big on going longer and longer and longer, and it took me a while before I realized that I was getting to the point where I could ride longer, but not ride faster. So I wish I'd done more intensity, particularly on the bike while I was training and racing. But it all worked out for me.
All right. Thanks a lot, AJ. And if the listeners want to learn more about you, you're coaching for D3 Multisport.
Yeah.
So you can be found on their website, d3multisport.com.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And do you have any social media outlets or anything else we should mention?
No, just through D3, a lot of our team stuff and coach stuff, and a lot of good information through the D3 social media. There's a lot of good information there. So that's where I would direct people.
Okay. Brilliant. Yeah, I'll also link to your blog archive on Training Peaks. You've written quite a lot on Training Peaks, so some really good articles. So they are worth checking out for the listeners. It will all be in the show notes. All right. Yep. Thanks a lot, and talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Take care. I appreciate your time.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview with AJ and found those specific examples useful, and that you fall into one of those buckets so that you can apply some of the information that you heard here. I have one main takeaway here is that using brick workouts, and quite a lot of brick workouts, can be a very effective way to train when you are a time-crunched athlete. This is certainly something that I can see myself experimenting with more. I do like doing a lot of brick workouts, both myself and giving them to my athletes, but quite rarely, except for the last 2 to 3 weeks before a race, my athletes do more than one brick workout per week. But I will experiment with this for sure, because it is, as AJ says, you can do a lot of quality in quite a short amount of time, and of course hit 2 different disciplines in one workout, so that makes it a whole lot more effective. As usual, you can find the show notes for this episode on thattriathlonshow.com. Any questions or comments, just leave them there in the comments section. You scroll down that page and you'll find it right there. If you have feedback or suggestions for topics for this podcast, you can email me on michael@scientifictriathlon.com, and that's Michael with a K, or tweet me on Twitter, where my handle is @SciTriat. And as usual, I really want to ask you to spread the word about the podcast. Tell your friends about it, rate and review it. Every little thing, every single additional listener helps a lot, and you can be a part of it. So I really, really invite you to do so, to help make this podcast grow and make it sustainable for the long haul by increasing the listenership, which is very important for its long-term trajectory. Finally, thank you so much to Precision Hydration, who is the sponsor of this podcast. I love Precision Hydration for many reasons. I've talked a lot about the fact that you can get precise about your individual electrolyte needs, which is of course the most important thing. But in addition, it actually tastes pretty darn good compared to almost any sports drink that I've ever tried. So what I do now is that I actually don't have energy in my hydration. I only have the Precision Hydration, which is just electrolytes, no carbs, no calories. And I get my electrolytes from things like gels, sometimes bars, at least if it's long training rides, but not necessarily races. There will be gels. So that's how I structure my hydration and nutrition these days. That's something that a lot of you are asking about, so I wanted to reiterate that that's how you can combine getting the energy and the electrolytes that you need in training and in racing. You can find out more about Precision Hydration on precisionhydration.com. You can take their free online sweat test to get an individualized hydration strategy for your next race and recommendations for which strength of electrolyte product you should use in your training and racing. If you end up buying and you are a new buyer, you will get your first box or tube of PH product for free if you use the discount code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps, at checkout. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.